So you're from Austin.
Born and raised
I'm
in
going
Austin.
to check another Austin High. Like, seriously, I'm going to have a chart here and just check off all the kids that went to Austin High. But why did you choose UT? Like, why did you decide to stay where you grew up?
So I grew up in East Austin back when East Austin looked a lot different. And you know, in East Austin, it was when it was predominantly a Hispanic blue collar neighborhood. You know, you were either a fan of the Dallas Cowboys or the Texas Longhorns.
You can't be both. I'm both.
Or both, I should say. And there was such an affinity and a love and a passion for anything Longhorns, anything Cowboys. And so growing up in East Austin, having the university here in your backyard, really, I never contemplated wanting to go anywhere else. You know, in my neighborhood, you know, there wasn't many people that went to college. And so just the fact that my goal was always to come here, I thought that was, you know, the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Both for myself, my family, but also to just establish credibility in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
To be like, I'm an actual student.
Yeah, that's right.
I root for them
That's
because
right.
I go here.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was always fun.
And you were in the school liberal arts.
Yep.
Yep. And where'd you live freshman year?
I lived on campus here at
Which dorm? I'm like, did you forget?
Yeah, I forgot the name. The one that has its own zip code.
Oh, Jester.
Jester.
Do you remember east or west?
It was west.
Okay.
I worked. I had like 3 jobs.
Yeah.
The entire time I was
on campus or around.
Around.
Okay.
Like I worked at UPS, unloading trucks in the morning from like 4 to 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'd go to class, and then I'd finish. And then I had a job at Foot Locker at Highland Mall, the old Highland Mall. And then Thursday through Sunday, I worked delivering beer for Brown Distributing, who distributes Budweiser products. And their warehouse was literally across the street from where I grew up. So I grew up in Chalmers Courts in East Austin, which were, a lot of people don't know this, the first of 3 public housing projects in the United States.
Really? Where is it?
It's on Comal and 4th Street.
Okay.
And so
it's still there.
It's still there. And the reason, so a lot of people they're like, Austin, Texas. First, people think of New York City or Chicago or, you know, these Northeast cities. Well, Lyndon Johnson at the time was congressman, right? And he ushered that legislation which established public housing in the United States. So because he did that, Chalmers Courts, Santa Rita Courts, and Rosewood Courts were the first 3 public housing developments in the United States.
And they're all here?
And they're all here. And they're all within a mile of each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's a little sort of fun fact that a lot of people don't realize.
Did you even know that when you lived there, or was it when you came back and you were...
It was when I came back here and I did a research paper on where I grew up and started uncovering, you know, some of those details.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, so, okay, you, as I said, you were a liberal arts, you majored in government, you graduated in 2002. What did you think you were going to do when you left college?
So I wasn't sure. You know, I knew I liked politics. I knew I liked policy. I knew I liked how government could or couldn't help communities. And so that's what I was interested in. Now, exactly how I would get involved in it, I wasn't sure. And so what happened was I was in an undergrad constitutional law class, taught at the law school, but it was for undergrad students.
Oh, so you had to like walk all the way across
Right.
far.
Yeah. And my teacher assistant at the time was a young law school student by the name of Andy Brown. Andy Brown is the current Travis County judge.
Okay.
So at the time, he I don't know. I mean, he took a liking to me. He was like, "What are you doing after college?" I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "Do you want to go work campaigns?" And I was like, "Sure." And so that was how I sort of my entry into working campaigns using what I studied.
I feel like that would be so fun and wild as a young person working campaigns.
It was so wild. It was like you're running around all over West Texas.
Yeah.
Setting up campaigns.
Everybody's young.
Everybody's young. You're just working these crazy hours.
You're not making much money, I'm sure.
No, you're not making much, but you're happy as can be because you don't know. You don't know that, all you know is you have a job.
And you're changing the world.
That's right. It's after college. You think you're changing the world. There's a lot of activity. And for the most part, people treat you pretty nicely because you're representing the Austin folks who are coming to help them with their campaign.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. That was essentially how I first got into, my love for politics and campaigns at the time.
Okay. And so after that, what was your next kind of like job?
So after that, campaigns in, little did I know that this wasn't a permanent full-time job. So I'm like, oh, I got to go look for another job. And so I come back to Austin and, I always say that luck and hard work sort of are intertwined in a lot of life. And if you have a little bit of luck and you work hard, things tend to work out for you. So I come back to Austin and the folks at the campaign like me, but they're like, we just don't have a job for you. We don't know. But they're like, you should go to the Capitol, see if somebody over there will give you a job. And so being, 22 years old, I'm like, sure. I literally walk in the state Capitol building. I start knocking on doors.
You did?
I start knocking on doors.
With a resume?
With a resume.
Okay.
And people were just like, thanks for coming. We'll call you. Again, luck being on my side, I walk in an office, and at the time, the state representative of the neighborhood I grew up in, a guy by the name of Representative Glenn Maxey, the first openly gay legislature in Texas, had just retired. His chief of staff decided to run for the seat and won the seat, a guy by the name of Eddie Rodriguez, who held the seat for 20 years. So I walk in the office. Eddie's packing up his former chief of staff's office to go move into now his state representative office. And I say, I'm a constituent. I live in your district. I would love to work for you. He takes my resume. We talk for about 10 minutes, never hear from him again. 2 months pass. I call him back and I go, hey, remember me? I stopped by your office. You said that get back with you. And he goes, oh, I thought I offered you a job and you took it. I go, oh, that's right. When do you want me to show up? And so that was my quote unquote, my first real job out of college.
That's cool.
After running that campaign.
That's wild. If you tell somebody it's go walk door to door. It's hard. I even did it because we do at Texas Exes, we do this orange maroon legislative day.
Mm-hmm.
I never walked in and everybody's like, yeah, it's normal. People walk into these rooms all the time, but it's really scary because the doors have no windows and you're just like, hello.
That's right.
To have the perseverance to just keep walking until you found somebody.
Yeah. I just didn't know any better, and I was just a kid who, there was no obstacle that I thought was too great.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. So you worked there, and you've always kind of worked in like a government public capacity.
Yeah. So that was a great experience. Eddie, to his credit, allowed me to really pick the passion policy areas that I was interested in. So those were affordable housing, right? Growing up in public housing, seeing how housing is a huge facet of a family's existence. So he allowed me to work on that. He allowed me to work on transportation. Being a kid again who grew up riding public transit in Austin. Cap Metro.
Yeah.
So he was like, you can have that.
Surely they would see that as valuable.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
That you had the real life experience.
Exactly.
You just didn't think you knew. You knew.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience because he did allow me to sort of pick what I wanted to work on and run with it. And that's what I did.
How does that define what you do today?
So it's kind of it's all interconnected on what I do today. So the long story medium is at the time Capital Metro was undergoing some financial difficulties. Senator Kirk Watson, who's the current mayor of Austin at the time, he decided to carry legislation to sunset Capital Metro. Capital Metro is actually an agency that's created by state statute,
Oh, okay.
right? But receives its funding every time we go buy something, right? 6 cents of the 8.25% goes to the state. 2.25 gets split between the city and Capital Metro. A lot of people don't know that, right?
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a significant amount of sales tax.
Yeah.
And so, but they're a state created agency by statute. So, Senator Watson decided, hey, we need to make some changes to the agency. Carried a bill that would that put it under sunset to mandate state changes.
Sunset is a company?
Sunset is the term that the state uses to try to doge state agencies.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? For using current events.
Okay, cool.
And so they come up with recommendations on you do X, Y, and Z to have better efficiencies, to be a better steward of taxpayer funding.
Gotcha.
And so they do this to each state agency. Capital Metro had never done this because it was a quasi-state agency.
Yeah.
I think Senator Kirk Watson, being a policy genius, kind of found this loophole. On the House side, they needed a House sponsor. Eddie Rodriguez was the House sponsor. I was the one that worked on the legislation on the House side. Legislation passes. Capital Metros, now we have legislation. We need to implement it. And so they recruited me to go work there.
Okay.
To implement that legislation.
Interesting. So you worked for Cap Metro.
Then I transitioned, and I really got to know the ins and outs of that agency, both from the financial, the operational, the community side, and the procurement side. Right, governments of all sizes. At the end of the day, they procure a lot of products and services. Typically, a lot of people don't know they go to the private sector to secure, whether it's landscaping, whether it's janitorial, whether it's security.
Like, what are you procuring? So what are you procuring for Metro?
Capital Metro doesn't actually run any of its services.
Oh.
They're not in-house services. They hire private companies to run the buses, the bus operators, right?
Yeah.
So I really got to learn the ins and outs of government procurement.
Okay.
Which, fast forward, working now at AshBritt as a president, we're now on the other side of the table. We're a private company that primarily does government contracting with governments.
Well, so before you were the president, it's AshBritt, but ABML, which is AshBritt Management and Logistics. You're the president of that, which is part of AshBritt.
Correct. So AshBritt is the leading company in the country for emergency response.
And when you say leading, like, how many emergency response companies are even out there?
So it's an interesting niche. There's 5 main companies. Those are privately held, family-owned companies. And then obviously there's a lot of second-tier, smaller companies. But the 5 major players, and AshBritt is the leader by any metric that you put. So whether it be contracts held around the country, revenue generated, amount of debris removed.
Yeah.
It's at the lead. So that's primarily what AshBritt did. So it did a lot of Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, a lot of the major natural disaster projects throughout the United States.
And so just like taking it back, so Hurricane Katrina happens, there has to be a cleanup. They can call you, and you guys are the company mobilizing the cleanup effort.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. And that's everything from debris and
primarily debris.
Debris. Okay.
So from Capital Metro, I go and I create and found and develop the logistics side of the company. So when you're in any natural disaster zone, right?
You create the logistics side of the company for
Correct.
AshBritt.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that's called AshBritt Management and Logistics.
Okay.
So anytime you're in a disaster zone, right, you're not just picking up debris. There's emergency feeding. There's emergency fuel. There's emergency sheltering. I mean, you talk about the spectrum of what there is in needs after a natural disaster. And so we quickly kind of realized, well, if we're doing the debris, we might as well do everything else.
Everything else. And your wife, by the way, is currently the CEO
Correct.
of AshBritt,
Of AshBritt.
also a Longhorn.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, let's create a new company and we'll start up the logistics. And this was in 2018, 2019, and COVID hits, right?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we're logistics experts. We put together a puzzle to provide the services that government needs. So in 2020, COVID hits, and the state of Texas calls me and says, "Can you set up COVID sites?"
Okay.
And I said, "Sure."
For vaccines or for like hospital beds?
Vaccines, field hospitals,
All
the
the things.
monoclonal antibodies, the IVs.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Sure." This was on a Thursday. I said, well, "How quickly do you need this?" They said, "Well, can you do it by Tuesday next week?"
Thursday to Tuesday.
Yeah. So come Tuesday, I had in Laredo, Texas, was our first facility. And what started there, we ended up being in 22 states, doing every type of medical service related to COVID that there was. So that's just a one story in how we manage operations, we manage logistics, and we move very quickly.
Wow. So, okay. If it had just been AshBritt, they did debris, so they wouldn't have been called upon to possibly build all of the
Correct.
logistics side during COVID.
That's right.
Okay. And okay, I want to start at the very beginning. So y'all are helping with, you did COVID, but also natural disasters. So what does it look like for you on a day-to-day basis? Do you have people that are just monitoring weather constantly? Is it, what is a day-to-day when there's not something happening?
So when there's not something happening, there hasn't been many of those days in the last 8 years.
Right.
Quite frankly, there's just been, whether it's a tornado or a flood or a wildfire or a hurricane or a snowstorm,
Yeah.
literally, or a COVID crisis. Literally, there's just been, so there really hasn't been a whole lot of downtime. We go from natural disaster to natural disaster. And so there hasn't been, quote unquote, a down time. But essentially what we have is we have a core team of folks, and we always say our favorite channel is probably the weather channel, because we're always monitoring the weather anywhere around the country. And typically the way the industry works is there's usually contracts in place that are competitively procured during blue skies.
Okay.
And then when there's a disaster and they need you, they pull that contract and you go to work.
So you're already constantly doing relationships with different government entities so
We
that
do a
when
lot of
needed,
training. Yep.
they pull you.
Yeah, we do a lot of training, a lot of scenario planning, a lot of coordination, a lot of tabletop exercises.
What's that?
So we go in and we go, okay, let's plan on what happens if a Cat 3 hurricane happens.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you want a base camp set up for first responders? Where would we set up, laundry facilities, shower facilities, sheltering facilities?
You're talking to someone in a city?
In a city or a county or state.
And is it a city or county that has a high risk already, possibly for a hurricane or fire?
Yes and no. A lot
Okay.
of times, any emergency manager is going to do their due diligence and doing their pre-planning, because you never want to be caught not prepared. It's
Right.
It's always better to spend a day or two out of the your year in doing this scenario planning.
Right.
And we offer that. We approach them and say, hey, would you like to do 2 days of scenario planning? And most say, yes, let's do it. Because it doesn't cost them anything, but obviously staff time. And the benefits of doing something like that are enormous.
And then it gives you guys a plan. Everything, I'm sure, changes and everything is changing all the time, but at least gives you a starting point. So then if they do call you, you've already maybe done a little plan and you can start there.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the first time we're meeting each other is not during an emergency time when
right.
The person on the government side, they're dealing with 50 different things. And this is just one of them. And so establishing a relationship, establishing what our cadence of operation is going to be, it helps in so many ways. That way they can go, okay, I know I got this covered. Let me go focus on other things that I need to focus on.
So like what happens first if there's a, huge hurricane, a huge flooding? Are y'all ever like in the moment saying, hey, we can help? Are you or only going to go help on the ones you already have a contract for?
It works both ways.
Okay.
Primarily, especially depending on what part of the country. So if you're looking at from Texas going through the Northeast, given that there's a propensity of natural disasters that tend to affect Texas through the Northeast and then obviously California, those states are very used to having to bring in contractors for emergency response. So they typically already know that, hey, we should have a pre-positioned contract that's competitively procured during blue skies. They already know. You don't have to tell them. They are like, yes. There's a lot of other states that haven't dealt with this. And so at times there are a handful of occasions where they don't have a contract in place and then a disaster happens. But just because a disaster happens doesn't mean I can go to that government client and go, hey, give us a contract, we'll do the cleanup. Because ultimately they have to go back and get their costs reimbursed for that disaster, and they go back to the federal government. The federal government always expects them to have a competitive procurement for the contract.
Gotcha.
So it keeps things, from an ethical perspective of them not just giving a contract to someone they know.
Right.
So usually there's an emergency 48-hour procurement that happens.
Okay.
And all the major companies submit their proposal with the technical approach, like their experience and pricing, obviously, and then they select someone based off of those.
And what's the first thing that happens? A natural disaster, you get the call, and do y'all have trucks and all the equipment that you own, or you're contracting all that out?
Both. So we bring in equipment, but also we one of our ethos at our company is looking to bring in small businesses. And the reason that's important is threefold. One, for us, we're not having to mobilize additional equipment, right? That's a cost savings. Number two, for the government, it's also a cost savings because they're not having to pay additional mobilizing costs. Number three, you're putting small businesses to work in a community that was just devastated.
Yeah.
And so any type of economic development in that community is very much appreciated. And then I guess I can add the fourth thing. Elected officials always appreciate when a big contractor's coming in and putting people in their community to work.
And so were you talking like fences and like logistics?
It can run the gamut. It can run the gamut from janitorial services to fencing to security to administration help to laborers in the field to even people who own trucks and equipment.
And is this all of a sudden your job? So you're saying you get the call going back to the COVID, you had Thursday to Tuesday, a hurricane flooding happens. It's quick. Is it just 24 hours?
Oh, it is 24 hours.
So when you're on, you're on.
You're on.
Yeah.
You're on. And so there's times when, we're in the field, you're talking about an austere environment. There's no running water. There's no power. You're literally you're living out of your car for 2 to 3 days until the fuel gets there, until the power gets there, until you can get some water, until you can get a hot meal. And so for 2 or 3 days, you may be eating crackers and peanut butter.
And that's you?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, all of our trucks have a generator and have extra fuel. And so we're able to, go 3 to 4, 5 days maybe, being sort of off the grid.
Yeah.
We'll have a Starlink in our vehicle. So we have everything we need: Wi-Fi, power, water, and a little bit of food.
Man, you have to be a certain kind of personality. Like, it's almost like the same with the news crews that just
That's
go, right? Like, and I know you run marathons and triathlons, so you must be someone who thrives in the chaos a little bit.
It's interesting. It takes a special personality because you're having to operate within a chaotic environment.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is you're just kind of having to figure out how to get a job done without necessarily a prescribed way of doing it.
Right.
Every disaster is a little bit different because every disaster is different.
Yeah.
And every client is different.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, the goal is still the same. It's to help that community get back on its feet immediately. And so we always look for team members that are resilient, that are problem solving, that have a great attitude, and that work hard. And it just happens to be that a lot of those folks are retired military, first responders.
Mm-hmm.
They're used to being in these environments.
Yeah.
They're used to getting up and going. They're used to being able to work in an environment where they don't have a lot of direction. They have to sort of figure it out. That's what we do really well.
I would assume like the emotional side, like you have to shut it off for a little bit because you have to get a job done, but does it still just, as things keep happening in nature, does it just completely shock you time after time?
It does. I think for us, we never take for granted what fragile of an infrastructure we live in, right? People tend to take for granted, I'm not saying everyone, but there's a segment of our society that just takes for granted that you go and you turn on the lights and you have lights, that you can go turn on your faucet and you have clean water.
Yeah.
Or that you can go to the grocery store and, quite frankly, buy whatever you want, whenever you want.
Yeah.
And all it takes is a disruption to our infrastructure. And guess what? The trucks that deliver that food to HEB aren't getting there. The water may not be clean water. Your electricity, you may not have electricity for some time. And so we do have, from that perspective, while we have a lot of first people who respond to get things back, to restore communities, we do live in a fragile infrastructure from that perspective.
Yeah, I would think it would change your whole shift on how you look at the world.
Yeah. And so I think that's what most of our team doesn't take for granted, that we all know how quickly, all the things that we enjoy as living in this country, that those could go away very quickly.
How long does a cleanup typically take? Ongoing for years?
It depends. So let's take a current project.
Yeah.
North Carolina, right?
The flooding in Asheville.
It was in the news quite a bit.
Yep. Y'all helped with the cleanup there.
We're helping with the cleanup.
You're still helping.
Yeah. So that disaster event happened at the end of September.
Okay.
There was a ton of flooding, a lot of debris in the waterways, a lot of devastated communities, people out of their homes. We'll probably be there probably into the fall of 2025.
So a full year.
Yeah, a full year. We have another project right now in Roswell, New Mexico. That was a flooding event. That was back in October. We'll probably finish that in June. So these are, they're not multi-year, but, sometimes you're talking 6 to 12 months.
What are y'all doing in Asheville right now, or that area of North Carolina?
It's a lot of waterway cleanup. So the flooding creates a lot of debris in the waterways, and those waterways, whether they're creeks or lakes, those all need to be cleaned out.
And so you're still cleaning that out. That's like what people, like, they see it, they think about it for a couple weeks. It's terrible. We still think about it, but we don't realize you're still out there working. Like, it's still not back to normal.
Well, it hits the news cycle, right? And it'll hit the news cycle for, 7 to 10 days maybe.
Yeah.
And then it kind of falls out of the news cycle. North Carolina tended to be a little different just because it overlapped presidential administrations. So it went from President Biden to President Trump. So that one stayed in the news a little longer. But excluding that, it'll kind of leave the news cycle, and the work still needs to be done.
Man, how do you shut things off? Like, can you still go on? I mean, you have a team, of course, but can you still go on vacation? Or is the minute something happens, you're like, well, gotta go?
I would say, and I think a lot of business owners can attest to this. Your life isn't, necessarily, the personal and the business. It's all kind of intertwined, right? It's all interlocked.
Yep.
And so, and I think, we would all say, yeah, that's just kind of our normal way of operating, our normal way of living. So to us, it's not, I don't think we look at it as work versus, this work-life balance. It's just kind of all intertwined.
Talk about having a job with purpose.
Yeah.
Every day you have purpose.
It's, it really does make a difference when you're hearing the stories of individuals affected.
Yeah. We're going to do some rapid fire questions now, just about your time at UT. And I didn't really ask, but do you have a specific favorite memory? Like a fun, lighthearted memory of your time at UT? So
when I was a kid, again, growing up in East Austin at Chalmers Courts, I was always looking at how can I make a buck?
Yeah.
And again, going back to the beginning of our conversation where I had a passion and a love for my Texas Longhorns. So back in the day, they allowed, I don't know how this was legal, but they allowed a 10-year-old kid like me show up at Texas Memorial Stadium, which was the name of the stadium at the time. They would give me a box of programs. Because you'd sell the book. They'd give me a all-access badge.
Yeah.
I'd get to the game, 2-3 hours before kickoff, sell my box of programs, make $20 from selling my box of programs. They let me hold on to my all-access badge, and then I'd go watch the game from the sidelines.
Oh, that's cool.
Talk about, I had perks and I made $20.
So you grew up going to the football games with an all-access pass.
Oh, yeah. So many diehard Texas fans would remember there was a year where Texas was playing Texas Tech, and Texas Tech ran a fake punt. The punter was running towards a first down, and Tony Brackens at the time, he ended up becoming a NFL, just blew up that punter. And it literally happened right in front of my face, and I'm there on the sidelines like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's always one of my favorite memories. And, now going back to the games, it's still something I obviously you see the smile on my face. It was one of the best memories as a child. And I did that for 4 or 5 years.
That's cool. I mean, look at all the hard work you put in, to now be able to come at the other side.
That's right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite place? I mean, you said you were working 3 jobs, but did you have a favorite place to go get food around campus?
Yeah, Coco's Cafe is still there.
What is that? I don't know about that.
It's right here on the drag.
Okay.
And so they sell the bubble tea.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, I love me some bubble tea. And then back in the day, there used to be, there weren't even food trucks. There was a food stand. It was like an Asian food stand. And it was a cart. And they would literally set it up in front of the Littlefield Fountain.
Yeah.
And they would sell egg rolls, 2 egg rolls.
I was here when you were here, and I do not remember that.
Oh, I would love, yeah. So it was this little cart that they would, and I'm like, to this day, I'm like, it was probably like a bandit pirate cart. They would just set up there. No one ever told them anything.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see it there now. So, which I think, they finally put a stop to it. But, and then there was what was that, Gumby's Pizza, where you could get that ginormous pizza for $5 that would last you 3 days.
Yep.
So yeah, those were all my favorite.
Advice for somebody starting UT.
I would always say, have fun, work hard, have a good attitude. I mean, those are very simple yeah, pieces of advice, but they ring so true. You know, if you just work hard, have a good time, have a great attitude, then it's just they will work out for you.
And then advice for someone, I mean, you're a leader. I don't know if that was what you were seeking when you left college, that you wanted to be a president of a company, but what's your advice for somebody who's like, I want to lead a company?
Yeah, so there's different traits for leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very vocal. Some people are very motivational. My leadership style is to empower people to be able to do their job, give them the tools that they need, give them the guidance, move out of their way. And then again, if that's not, and if they can't, then hold them accountable.
Yep.
And holding them accountable doesn't mean that you're a tyrant. It just means that, okay, this may not be the best role. Let's find another role for you. And so, you know, my leadership advice always is, you know, have a team that you trust and be mindful that as a leader, you have to allow those on your team to get the job done. And everybody has their different work styles, and figuring out which work styles are the best for the role that you need fulfilled.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Longhorns. How can Longhorns help, by the way?
That's a good question. So for us, when we're out in a community, you know, if there's something that we can do to help a community. So we're always looking for we're in a community working. How can we always look for ways not only to be in the community restoring it, but also to look to partner with nonprofits that are making a difference, that we're making a difference prior to the disaster event, and that will be making a difference after, and how we can develop partnerships with them, because we not only want to be there during the disaster, but we want to leave a legacy after. And so any of those connections in any communities are always appreciated.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em horns.
Yeah.
Hook 'em horns.